Hi again. So now we're going to continue with this assignment, starting with slide 13, which talks about predicting the shapes of molecules. So earlier this week, you built some molecules using the molecular model kits that included plastic balls and little bonds to connect them. We're going to see how you can go from a drawing, like the drawings we did the last couple of days, to a model, like a three-dimensional model, or how you could visualize or picture that model just based on the drawing. So in order to predict the shape of a molecule, you want to take a look at the drawing and you want to identify if there are lone pairs. So this molecule, for example, has 3 bonded pairs of electrons, but it also has 1 lone pair. So that's going to affect its molecular geometry. If we look at this water molecule, you should be able to circle the lone pairs, so the pairs of dots. You can use the circles that I put here in the margins. Or if you're working on paper, then you can just go ahead and circle them on the paper. But circle the 2 lone pairs that this water molecule has. Those lone pairs are going to be important when we're trying to figure out what shape the molecule will have. If you think about the word lone, it sounds kind of like alone. And in this case, I think it refers to the fact that these electrons belong to nitrogen, but they're not shared between nitrogen and hydrogen. So they're nitrogen's electrons. It's lone electrons. They only belong to nitrogen. If you look at the next slide, you'll see that we can also call these regions electron domains. So electron domains include both the bonded electrons and the lone pairs. Most of the time, the elements that we study are going to have 4 electron domains. So for example, CH4 has 4 bonds, and those are its electron domains. So it would be tetrahedral. A water molecule has only 2 bonds, but it also has 2 lone pairs. So when it has something on each of 4 sides, we're still going to start out with that tetrahedral shape as our base. So the 3 bases that we will have are either tetrahedral, trigonal planar, or linear. But in order to get a trigonal planar or linear molecule, you would have to have a double bond, because if they're all single bonds and we're trying to achieve the octet rule, then we can tell that 8 divided by 2 is 4, and it would have 4 electron domains. In order for it to only have 3 electron domains, then one of its bonds has to be a double bond. In order for it to have only 2 electron domains, then both of the bonds would need to be double bonds. And we'll see some examples like that. Think of a domain as a region or an area. So those are the areas where there are electrons found around the element. Remember that electrons usually want to reside like between the 2 elements that are sharing them, because they both have a pull on those electrons. And they also want to be as far away as possible from other pairs of electrons, which is why these 2 lone pairs are up here on the top of the oxygen's head, because they want to be as far away from these bonded pairs as they can, and also from each other as they can. You don't see all the electrons clustered on one end of a molecule. So the last explanation is just that I mentioned that we want to start with a base. So NH3, for example, has 4 domains. So we would start with tetrahedral as its base, because that means that it's going to have 4 electron domains, like 4 holes drilled in a marble. But you might remember that nitrogen actually only had 3 holes drilled in the marble, and that's because nitrogen only forms 3 bonds, right? The 4th hole would be at the top where its lone pair goes. And sometimes there are model making sets that include a lone pair that you can sit on top. But in this case, our model making set doesn't. If we look at the diagram, we can see 4 domains. So we're going to start with tetrahedral. But then when we predict the geometry of the molecule, we're not going to include this lone pair. We're just going to erase it. And if we erase it, what we have left are those 3 legs on the bottom, which gives us a trigonal pyramidal shape. So that's how we go from tetrahedral to trigonal pyramidal, is if instead of 4 bonds, it just has 3 bonds and 1 lone pair.